Well, hello, sociologists, and here we are again talking about social movements. Lesson 3. It's quite hard to fit my hat in, rather large. Some learning goals for you all today. So, you're going to know what social change is. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive into that concept. You're going to be able to evaluate an exciting skill that's really important for your success in the exam, which we're not amazing at the moment. And you're going to be able to write responses. This is one of those lessons where you get a practice response to do at the end. Right on. So, the concept of social change. Here's a quote. Political and economic systems eventually fade away. Yeah. The only one thing that is certain in life is change. If you can find a way to squeeze that quote in an answer, you're going to look pretty cool. So society is always changing. Duh. It's even changed in Australia since your birth. So if you are, I don't know, 18, you're born in just past the year 2000, huge changes in Australia in that time. A strengthening of the multiculturalism in Australia. Gay marriage is now legal. There's less homophobia, less racism, less sexism than there was when I was your age. Huge movements in the environmental sphere. There's been big economic changes, more globalization. Australia is still a high wage economy, but it's lost a lot of its manufacturing. I could go on. Not to mention the way that a global pandemic is going to change society. Yeah. There are three big trends that are quite influential when it comes to social change, and a lot of them started quite a while ago. So the first one is urbanization, the move from the countryside to the city. Yeah, most of the population growth everywhere in the world these days is in big cities. So big cities get bigger through natural increase, i.e. babies, but also from migration from rural areas to urban areas, because that's where all the work is these days, yeah? Urbanization is happening because people go looking for jobs. Heaps of farming is now automated and done by machines, so we don't need heaps of farmers, yeah? Before the Industrial Revolution, like 90% of people were farmers, but now we have machines and tractors and stuff to do all that work, so people now live in cities where the work is. Industrialization, that's the mechanization of society, yeah? So instead of things being hand done, they're done by machines. And obviously the industrialization trend started during the Industrial Revolution, which was from about 1750 to about 1850. And globalization, the idea that the world is hyper connected to each other. You know, I mean, like 100 years ago, if you wanted to contact the other side of the world, it would be very slow. You might need to write a letter and put it on a boat, and then 3 months later, the person might get that letter and go, "Ooh, okay," write a letter back to you. You get it 6 months later. Now, house party, Zoom, Messenger, FaceTime. It's all immediate. Globalization has meant huge spreading of ideas. So, and you know, there's a million effects of globalization, economic integration. But one really big one, I would say, is that the world is becoming more similar. Change can come from conflict or from groups forming. And we look particularly at groups forming social movements. Check out this graph. This shows this is a graph about urbanization. Yeah. So the urban population is going up way more than the rural population. And where the two intersect, that's when the urban population was more than 50% of the planet. Yeah, the rural population is steadying off. It's probably going to start going down again soon. But the urban population is going right up there. No, I'm not asking you to write this down, so don't have a tantrum. It's just a little interesting slide about the definition of industrialization. Social and economic. I should say social and economic. Economicals, that's not the right word there. Anyway, Social and economic development of industry on a large scale. Yeah, so it increases how many things get made, and it's moving away from people making things to factories and machines making things. Yeah, so Industrial Revolution started in the UK, spread to Europe and North America, and then everywhere else. And here's a slide about globalization. So what are some of the effects of globalization? Labour mobility. Workers can move from country to country. Capital mobility, that means money can move from place to place. Don't get confused and think that capital means like a capital city. Capital usually means like money. Technology, so there's a lot more technology sharing due to globalization. Obviously, there's improved transport. I'm talking planes. I'm looking at you, planes. I'm looking at you. And we've got more companies that are multinational, and lower tariffs. Tariffs are just little economic barriers that people put up to stop goods coming in from other countries, but they are being lowered everywhere. Anyway, they are some of the economic effects of globalization. There are, of course, social ones as well. So just really briefly, what about social change with families? Yeah, how have families changed? So, the idea, like what a typical family is, has changed heaps. However, they are still the core of society. They are still the core unit. Yeah, when you hear the government talk about people, they talk about families. But what kind of changes have we seen in families? All these ones. Now, thankfully, because we've done a little bit better in human rights, gay people can get married. We have a lot more blended families now, so that's families where the parents split up and then took their kids to another family with another family that had split parents, and so you get stepdads, stepmums, blah blah blah. I think I've got like about 8 parents because of that. The nuclear family is more common now, so in more traditional societies you would live with your extended family. You'd have your grandparents there, and maybe the siblings would stay in the family house until they're much older. But now you just have the nuclear family. It's not called nuclear family because it's to do with nuclear power. It's to do nuclear as in the nucleus, just the core. It's just the core of the family. Mum, dad, kids, or dad, kids, mum, kids, whatever. Kids, this is an interesting one. This has been a big change from when I was your age. When I was 17, I moved out and never looked back. But because housing is so much more expensive these days and employment is more difficult to get for young people, it's expensive to move out, so young people are living at home longer. There's way more unmarried couples living together. Family sizes are much smaller. People are having less kids, which is going to solve our population problem eventually. Ta-da. Okay, so here's just a random slide about social change. So how can changes happen? From social values, from group values, and from individual values. So even just with that, you could do a pretty sweet analysis looking at the link between individual and social values, looking at the link between group and individual values, and looking at the link between group and social values. You need to have your analysis hat on all the time, yeah? When you see a concept, think, how can that be split up into sub-concepts, and how do those sub-concepts, what relationship do they have to each other? It's time for an activity. You're going to evaluate the influence of social movements on social change. So most of the activities that we do in this unit, the wording of them is coming straight out of the study guide, yeah? So this is one of the skills that you're expected to learn, evaluating the influence of social movements on social change. Okay. So the definition of evaluate is present a judgment of an issue by stressing both strengths and weaknesses. Yep, so you got to talk about the strengths, talk about the weaknesses, and then present a judgment, an overall. On balance, is it a positive thing, a negative thing, whatever. So let's start with an easy one. Think about our current society. Do you think it's getting better, or do you think it's getting worse? There's no right or wrong answer here, yeah? This is welcome to the humanities. So what I want you to do is, what do you think the strengths of our current society are? What do you think the weaknesses of our current society are? And then I want you to give an overall judgment, and there's some direction about how long it should be. Minimum 2 dot points for the strengths and weaknesses, and I want you to write 2 or more sentences giving an overall judgment based on the strengths and weaknesses that you've outlined. Do that in your exercise book. Okay, here's a video called How Does Social Change Happen?
Activism in the 60s, and here we're speaking mostly of the late 60s, not the civil rights movement, did have a lasting effect in just generally civilizing the society. So women's rights, gay rights, environmental concerns, opposition to aggression, lots of things have changed.
Now you are dealing with a super concentrated, high-level industrial state that has all kinds of ways of spying and sabotaging you, but still the basic communication, person to person, the problems of bad housing, the problems of bad health, the problems of police violence, the problems of social injustice, they may have a different form, but they're not different problems.
I would say to young people that are starting off, and if they've got beliefs about climate change or horrors of what the refugees are going through, they should make work about that.
Get out on the streets, organise yourselves well. There's no need for violence.
Just to get up off your arse and get out there and join whatever campaigning is, because you then learn, well, why am I doing this? And then you'll meet other people who'll go, you're a complete wanker, you know, I believe X, Y, and Z, you believe ABC, you know, then you've got to argue your point. Well, this is why I believe ABC.
Now you just whip up a tweet or an email and you can mobilize mass movements. But what I divine with some of that is sometimes it's easy to throw up a very quick movement around an issue, but it's difficult to sustain it.
It's really important for successful activism that activists don't just talk to each other. The really important key to activist success is talking to the wider public.
If you truly believe that your message is a message for everybody, it's about making life better for everybody, then if you find the right way to put that message out, it will connect with the people who you're trying to speak to.
No government initiates change because they've maintained the status quo. They've got into power, so they're about to, you know. But it's only by the actions of ordinary people all through the centuries, really, that initiate that beginning of change.
This notion of forming coalitions was part of how we were doing our community organizing and our political organizing, because all of these are grassroots organizations without a lot of money, without a lot of budgets, but have a tremendous, a tremendous communal support, because they're actually talking about the needs of people who are kind of left out of the political system.
Activity can be frightening, can be difficult. I've been scared out of my wits many, many times. Whether it works, whether it's bad times or good times, that accumulation of activity gives you such an amazing knowledge about what's possible and what isn't against the odds, because you're pretty much always against the odds, aren't you?
Backlash was actually quite personal. The concept of radicalization assumes a passive subject being influenced by evil. I think most people who become involved in politics radicalize themselves. They become radical because the world is changing and because they want to be part of it.
We have to assume that every critic and every opponent is a potential friend and ally. The fact that we were well known for backing up our claims with eyewitnesses, research, statistics, that immediately got us taken much more seriously than an earlier generation of LGBT groups.
So you still have to band together, have a commitment, challenge the authorities, risk your life, and put everything on the line to make the world better.
There's no single answer for everyone. No single, this is the way to do it for everyone. It depends who you are, what your circumstances are, what your concerns are, where your engagements are, but the opportunities are enormous, and each individual just has to answer that question. How am I going to use the opportunities available to me to deal with the critical problems of the world.
Another video, very short one. It's a theory of social change.
In every era, in every country, movements emerge that attempt to transform society. Why do some succeed while others falter? To build powerful social movements, three core components need to align: political opportunity, organizational infrastructure, and engaged individuals. These components are shaped both by long-simmering social, economic, and political trends and unforeseen eruptions. And for significant change to occur, all three must be strong. Take the anti-apartheid movement. In a moment shaped by African decolonization, the apartheid regime, and the Cold War, there emerged strong political opportunity, including international sanctions and openings within South Africa, an engaged and mobilized citizenry, and established organizational infrastructure. Over several decades, the three sectors worked in collaboration, sometimes ebbing, sometimes flowing, but building enough momentum to eventually bring apartheid to an end. But when one or more components are weak, movements falter. Take the example of the Occupy movement, which arose against a backdrop of the financial crisis, growing inequality, the Arab Spring, and Citizens United. It sprang from individuals expressing their outrage at corporate bailouts and systemic inequality. Political opportunity followed, eventually leading to some reforms. But robust new infrastructure did not emerge, and the momentum fizzled as organizations proved unable to fully harness the grassroots movement. Today, a 21st century women's movement is gaining strength at a time shaped by an assault on women's reproductive rights, economic inequality, and the immigration debate. Political opportunity is arising as issues such as paid sick leave and minimum wage are being recognized as women's rights issues. Established women's rights organizations are forming new coalitions with workers' rights and immigration groups. Will an energized grassroots base transform the women's rights movement by focusing on economic issues? Movement building is far from an exact science, and it takes more than a simple formula to make social change happen. But when political opportunity, organizational infrastructure, and engaged individuals unite, they can create a powerful force capable of bending the arc of history towards justice.
Right, so I wanted to find a skills video, and this is a video. It's from the UK, and it talks about their A-levels, which is a form of a senior school of assessment that you guys don't do, but hopefully the point's made. So it talks about the difference between analysis and evaluation. Now, some of the terminology is not exactly the same as the stuff that I use, but hopefully you get something out of this video.
Hey everybody, welcome to this video tutorial. I am about to share with you what the difference is between analysis and evaluation. If you stay to the end, you will get some tips about how you can ensure that you are analysing and evaluating. As always, massive thank you for watching. Remember to click that like button if you get something out what you see, comment if you have any questions, and subscribe, boost my confidence. The main objectives that you're going to be assessed on are AO1, knowledge and understanding, AO2, application, but today we're going to focus on AO3, analysis and evaluation. Two skills bolted together as one assessment objective, but actually they are two totally different things. Now, as soon as you understand the difference, please make sure that you click that like button. Here is an example paragraph, but what we want to know is where the analysis and evaluation is. And if you click on the link in the comments below, you will see a document that you can either download or print it off and read if it is not clear to you on the screen. If you are viewing this on a mobile device, for example, so you may want to get that out in front of you. This example comes from a student answer for the 30 mark on class and achievement that was on paper 1, Education and Theory and Methods in 2018, and I'll be using it to give you some examples about how you can analyse and evaluate. So what is analysis? Well, it's breaking down an argument or explanation into the ideas that make it up and show how they fit together. It's also comparing and contrasting, showing how something is similar or different. And it's also through the way that you organise your essays, having paragraphs that have a logical chain of reasoning. So we're going to go back to the student answer and see if we can find examples of the analysis that I'm showing you right now. So way number 1, breaking down an argument and showing how things fit together. And this student does this as they break down the labelling process, showing how it links to the self-fulfilling prophecy and then leads to achievement or underachievement of the different social classes. So that's one easy way to show analysis. Break down the explanation into the steps that make it up. The second way to analyse is through comparing and contrasting, and this student does this a couple of times by comparing the middle class and the working class students. Firstly, how they are labelled, and also the difference in how the middle class and working class internalise their labels, leading to different achievement outcomes. So by looking at something from a different angle would also be seen as analysis. A final way is organising paragraphs into a logical chain of reasoning, and this student does this. It follows a paragraph structure. It has a point which is labelling, and then they explain that point using Becker to show understanding of what that is. They also include the self-fulfilling prophecy as part of that explanation. Applying to the question, they link to working class underachievement and middle class achievement. And also they do the comment or the comparing the middle class and the working class, and the student does that twice. And this paragraph then ends with the evaluation. So what is evaluation? Well, that's weighing things up, looking at arguments for and against a particular view, or examining theories, assumptions, or linking it to a particular perspective, or putting forward alternative views to create a debate, or discussing strengths or disadvantages of a method in a methods type question. So the evaluation often comes at the end of a paragraph, but it can come part way through if you want to be critical of a part of an argument. Now in this student answer, we can see it at the end. We have an argument against a particular view, for example, the idea that labelling is not a straightforward process, that not all students will accept their label, some might reject it. But this also means that the student has linked it to a particular perspective, e.g. the interactionist challenging the idea that we are not puppets in society, suggesting that we have free will. So how about some tips and ideas? Now I've seen this quite a few times, this technique to help you analyse cages, and what we have seen in our student answer was the C. Let's compare the classes. If the question was about gender, we could talk about how boys are labelled and compare it to how girls are labelled. Likewise, if it was about ethnicity, we can compare white students with black students and even Asian students. Another way to show analysis is showing how arguments fit together in the bigger picture. So for example, we could link internal and the external factors. So this student in the paragraph that I showed you could have linked teacher labelling to students' backgrounds. How a teacher label a pupil is based on these stereotypes, but these stereotypes are formed by a student's home background. Whether the students are culturally or materially deprived, that often means that they don't look like the ideal pupil to the teacher. How about showing evaluation? Well, think of the argument that's given. Is it true of all cases? The assumption that this argument can apply to everyone can always be challenged. Or is the argument an old argument? Can it apply to today's society? Often when we're giving evidence from maybe a Marxist or a functionalist or even a feminist viewpoint, times are changing, and postmodern ideas of diversity and choice can be used to evaluate, to suggest some of these arguments are just out of date. So as always, massive thank you for watching. If you now know what analysis and evaluation is and you know the difference, please click like. If you've got something out of it and you want to ask a question, you can always comment below, and make sure you download the document as well and stick it in your folder showing an example. Have a great day, and I shall speak to you again soon.
Real quick reflection activity. I want you to write a reflection activity and then give me a plus, minus, or interesting with the topic of social change. What's a plus about it, what's a minus about it, and what's just interesting about it. It's the most wonderful time of the lesson, the homework time. So first up, you're going to read the relevant part of the textbook, and then you're going to do a practice response. Right? This is a practice extended response, which are worth 10 marks. So I want you to only write for 15 minutes. Don't write for any more. That's unrealistic. You need to find out how much you can write in 15 minutes. Well, in this case, you're typing, because if you're in my class, you're putting it on OneNote. Anyway, this is the question. Evaluate the ability of a social movement to influence social change. In your response, consider what has changed and who has changed, and refer to a social movement that you have studied this year. Obviously, you haven't done a full-on case study yet, but I'm sure you can do one about Dakota Pipeline or gay marriage or something. So remember, we've done a lot of work on what the word evaluate means. Yeah, it's strengths and weaknesses and then an overall judgment. So that might help you with how you're going to structure your answer to that one. Yeah. Have a look at the response templates if you want. How to write an extended response. That template's on OneNote. I've printed it out for you 1,000 times. Anyway. Thanks heaps for participating in today's lesson. Keep it real.